Shabbat Shalom. In this extraordinary parsha that is truly one of my most beloved ones, there is a section that is read a little later than the verses we got to hear this morning, but it is one that I feel deeply always needs a third or 10th or 20th look, and it's one that's particularly precious to me at this moment. This is Genesis chapter 16. It begins on page 86 in your Etz Chaim. If you're still holding them, I invite you to turn there. There is so much happening at this time in human and Jewish history. Page 86. Worlds are shifting. Floods, wars, strife, political struggles, global shifts are happening in the larger picture that is presented to us here. And yet, the most intense, painful, important drama takes place in a family, in a home, between a husband and a wife, between the wife and her maid. And it's this tiny domestic scene that captivates at least me every time I see it. God has told Abram that the world will be his. We can debate about that, how that's panned out. But when God offers Abram and promises him everything, your reward shall be very great, God says. I will be a shield to you, back in chapter 15. Abram says, really, God, what could you possibly give me? What could be of any value? When in this case, he says, I have no heir. We have no child. In other words, we have no future. And so God promises Abram that there will be a future, hard as it is to see at that moment. And in chapter 16, when Sarai is still barren, despite all of the easy fertility of previous chapters, this family will have to struggle and suffer and wait and make mistakes that haunt us to this day in order to ensure a future. There is so much to take away from this section. We would miss lunch, and that I promise we won't do. But Sarai offers her Egyptian maidservant, no coincidence that Hagar is Egyptian. It is thought, at least one explanation is that Hagar came with Sarah when she left the Pharaoh's palace, also in this parsha, remember? And there is some suggestion that the bondage in Egypt of later centuries is a kind of payback, a cosmic, not very funny joke to repay the Israelites for their enslavement of just this one person. It's a radical thought, but not all that far out, actually. And Hagar, generally translated as the stranger, or it's referenced to the Arabic to flee or fugitive. Not sure what Hagar really means, but the straight Hebrew would seem to suggest the stranger, the other, the dweller. She conceives right away. And when she does, Sarai is lowered in Hagar's esteem. The drama between these women could be an opera, if it isn't already. Sarai and Abram have a pretty intense marital battle. Sarai treats Hagar harshly, and she runs away. And then verse 7, an angel of the Lord finds Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, a place generally where visions take place and lives are changed, wells or springs of water. The spring on the road to Shur, and said, "Hey, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" Hagar is only able to answer the first part of that question. She only knows where she's coming from. She says, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." As to the question of where she's going, she doesn't say anything. And the angel of God said to her, "Go back. Submit to your mistress's harsh treatment." And God said to her, "I will greatly increase your offspring, and they shall be too many to count." God said to her further, "Behold, you are with a child and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for God has paid heed to your suffering." And she called God who spoke to her, "You are El Roi." And we need to stop there, as I do every year at Lech Lecha, and marvel at the authors of the Torah who put in the mouth of an Egyptian slave woman the only instance in the entire Torah where a human being names God. It happens in a couple of other spots. Also, by the way, a woman does it. But here, this female Egyptian slave woman, because that's what she is, names God. What a cameo role to play for an actress. And what an extraordinary moment that was remained in our Torah to remind us how essential it is to follow the words of Abram earlier in the Parsha. We are kinsmen. You are El Roi, by which she meant in this translation, "Have I not gone on seeing after he saw me?" El Roi, translated in many places as the God who sees, or the God of seeing, the God who sees me, etc. Difficult to translate, but it's a mystical moment, unlike really almost any other in the Torah. She has the presence and is given the empowerment to name the same God that we all share. And therefore the well, or the spring, was called Be'er Lachai Roi, often translated as the well of the God of vision, or the well of the living one who sees, or the well of the vision of life. If I asked you all to take notes, and I won't, I would say, write that down. Be'er Lachai Roi. It is not an accident, but we will hear that name again in a couple of weeks. And there, my hope is to draw a connection to this moment in time so that we can not only view here the seeds of the conflict that we are still experiencing to this moment, but also find within the notion of the well of the living God, the one who sees, a blueprint, a pathway to the blessing of peace. I'll see you in 2 weeks for that one, but in the meantime, let us marvel at the wisdom and the generosity of the Torah in this particular instance, Hagar, the stranger, giving the Holy One a name of vision. Shabbat Shalom.